Hey everybody, it's K-Ball here from Zurb. Today we're going to be learning how to use the new foundation building block system that we just released to create your own building block. Building blocks are just snippets of code that build complex components, and in the new system you can build them straight in a build system that is very similar to any sort of Zurb Stack foundation project you might have worked before. We'll go into what are the pieces that you have to code, how they fit together, and how they generate a beautiful building block page as easy as 1, 2, 3. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's get you building a building block. So the first thing to know is that the building blocks repository lives on GitHub. It lives under github.com/zurb/building-blocks. And so to be building a building block, you're going to want to check that building block or that repository out. So I'm just going to go over and clone that down. Just takes a second, though installing the dependencies is going to take a little bit longer. So while that's going, let's look a little bit at what's in this repository. So this repository is built using the Zurb Stack. So if you're familiar with the Zurb Stack, you are already familiar with a lot of the technologies that go into this. It's built using Node.js, uses Gulp to process builds and things like that. Now we've taken the build system for the building blocks repository and taken it a few steps beyond what you might do on a typical website. But what that's done is made it really easy for you to create building blocks as code and have them generate these beautiful building block pages that are easy to use and easy for people to install from. So it looks like my clone has finished. Let me go into that directory, and we have both npm dependencies and bower dependencies. So we're going to do an npm install and a bower install, get those things started and ready to go. While that goes, I'm going to look a little bit more at the structure of the building blocks repository. So a bunch of top level stuff. What's going to matter for you is digging into the source. So if you're creating a building block, the directory you're going to care about is the source building blocks directory. And actually we can show that if I come back over here and go into demos building blocks. You can see that in the command line as well. Source building blocks. There's a whole ton of stuff in there. Every building block that is live on the site lives in a directory here. So let's pick one and just jump into it. In fact, let's see what's going to be a good simple one to dig into. I think the article card is a good one. So let's look into what's involved with that. So you can see in this directory, article card, we have an HTML file, a Sass file, a Yamo file, and a .png. Let's actually step back and look for one that's got some more than that. Let's look for one that has some JavaScript involved with it. It's a little bit more complicated, but I know that the dashboard layout that we cover actually in the installation example video has some JavaScript involved with it. In fact, it has a lot of stuff involved in it. So let's look at this. This has, I believe, every different item that we can touch. So it has HTML, it has JavaScript, it has Sass. It also has a layout Sass, which we'll talk about in a sec. It's got this YAML file. So let's actually look at what an example YAML file might look like. So this is the metadata for a building block. So when you create your building block, possibly the first thing you'll want to do is create your YAML file. We look at this one for the app dashboard layout. It has a name associated with it. It has a description. It has a category. It has potentially some tags, what versions of Foundation it's expected to work with. Don't worry too much about the container class right now. Then it has an author associated with it, which is your name, your chance to be famous, your GitHub profile at a minimum. This is where we're going to pull your image from for the building block site. And you can also add things like your Twitter account and your Foundation forum account. If we go back and look at what these other files in, these files are literally the contents of your building block. This is just code. It's managed within your code system. And when we start tinkering with this and creating this, it's going to work in the build system as is. So as soon as our dependencies are done installing over here, we'll just start building a building block for you to try out. Similarly, the Sass associated with this is just Sass code It will be evaluated in the context of a Foundation project. So it will have access to all of Foundation mixins, will have access to standard Foundation settings, things like that. So I don't know if there's an example. Yeah, here we can see we're referencing primary color, we're referencing white, things like that. In fact, a good building block will depend on the components in your settings file because then it's actually customizable when you install it in a new project. It takes on the flavor of that project right away. Okay, so we finished installing our dependencies over here. Let's hop into creating a new building block. So I'm going to create a really silly building block for this example. In fact, I'm going to create a building block that isn't really much of a building block, but it's simple enough that we can use it for this example and get through it in good time. So source building blocks, I'm going to make a, what shall we make? Let's make a Yeti card. Source building blocks, Yeti card. So when you create a new building block, before we do anything, we should actually check out a branch. So we're going to check out a branch, new Yeti card. This is where we're going to do our work. When we're done and ready to submit, we'll actually submit this branch as a pull request, but we'll get into that in a later video. So we've got this new Yeti card, source building blocks, new Yeti card. Oh, we didn't create it. We created the branch. Let's create the building block. So now make dir source building blocks, new Yeti card. Now I'm a little old school. I'm doing this all in the command line, and I'll do my code editing with Vim. You could do this just as well in any project editor. You could do this using Sublime. You could do this using whatever code editor you use. So source building blocks, new Yeti card. And I'm going to copy a previous set of things just to get us started quickly. So let's copy, I think there's actually a basic card component here. So if I copy the basic card stuff into here and rename it all, so move all of these things to be my new Yeti card. All of the files should be named the same as the directory. So the Foundation building blocks structure is creating static websites based on these files. It's all file driven, and so the naming conventions are really important. So I want all of my components here to be named the same as the directory. So new Yeti card.html. I want to do the same thing with YAML. I want to do the same thing with Sass. I'm going to get rid of the PNG for now. So I've got these things involved. For my YAML file, I'm going to take this and give it a name, new Yeti card. I'll still call it a card and content for tags. We're going to description, a card for Yetis. We'll do version 63631. Cards are available in Foundation as of 6.3 and 6.3.1. This is an interesting one. So you can have your building blocks be either expected to work in the flex grid or the float grid. So Foundation lets you choose whether you're in flex grid mode or float grid mode. By default with building blocks, given the way the world is moving, our default is flex. So all building blocks by default will be built within the flex grid with Foundation settings that has flex enabled, though you can actually specify otherwise. So if you want float, you can set grid float. Container class is one way to specify what's the container that your building block will be rendered within. So for now, let's get rid of the grid. We want this to be a flex card. All good things are flex. I'm K-Ball. I love Flexbox. But let's keep it this way for now. And let's jump into the new Yeti card HTML. So this thing was an old card somebody did. We're going to get rid of most of the content in here and just essentially have a card. We'll call it a Yeti card. We can even have it have the Foundation card class on it. We'll put a card divider in here that just says Yetis. Put some other stuff. Maybe we'll have a Yeti image. Let me go find a good Yeti image. So Foundation, Zurb.com. Where's the Yeti? Let's just put this guy on there. Where's that image? Oh, my dev tools are off screen. Here they are. Actually, I'll just open that image in a new tab so I can link to it directly. So we'll put that image in our card. And let's blow out the sass for now. We'll get rid of it. We'll just put nothing for now. Let's look at how this thing actually ends up building. So I mentioned this is a Zurb Stack project. I'm going to go to a new tab. Am I in the right one? Demos, building blocks. The way that we run our project is we run npm start. This is going to start a dev server. It actually does a quite extensive build. So you'll see as this goes through, it's going to do a bunch of different tasks. It's checking git logs to put timestamps on. It's doing all sorts of metadata analysis, things like that. So this build is pretty extensive. However, it's also pretty fast, especially once it gets going. So once it goes, it'll actually rebuild quite quickly. This is compiling all of the building blocks in our system and getting them ready to create a flat file structure, just like any Foundation Stack project. And unfortunately, like any current Foundation Stack project, the JavaScript is the slowest part. That should speed up in Foundation 6.4, but we'll get there. Okay, so we now have a local version running of the building block site. This is everything. It's got all of the building blocks that are there. There's no backend or data necessary. All of these are static files that are generated. The whole backend is the file system. So let's search for the one we just put in, Yeti card. All right, here we go. It's already there by Zurb demo, new Yeti card. There's no thumbnail. That's where those PNGs are going to come in. But let's actually go in, and we can see that the code we've been working on is already in place and creating this page. You can see that there's HTML, there's Sass, no CSS because this is empty, it's not generating anything, and the JavaScript is empty as well. That's it. To create a building block, all you have to do is put, oops, I killed my server by accident, but is put code into the right places in the system. So just as a reminder where we are, we went into source building blocks, we created a new Yeti card folder, and now we're creating new Yeti card, Sass, and JavaScript in there. So if we were then to update this, it's going to take a while because I killed my server, so it'll refresh. But say we were going to make this thing, let's just give it a max width. So max width, 400 pixels. We'll wait for this to finish so you can see the live reload. This is using Browser Stack, also like any sort of Zurb Stack project. So it will actually live reload. Sometimes it actually reloads a couple of extra times because what we're doing here is we're running an iframe inside of the building block page. We'll track that down eventually and fix it. Though since this is open source, if you want to track it down and fix it, you are absolutely welcome to. But when we save and update, what happens is it reruns some build pieces, rebuilds the appropriate stuff, and then reloads the browsers. And you can see that our max width is in place here. Our code has already been updated, and the CSS we're generating is updated to do it. If we were to add some JavaScript, let's add new yeticard.js. Oh gosh, what will it do? So maybe on, we have jQuery available because we're in Foundation. Foundation depends on jQuery. Maybe when you click on new Yeti card, we're going to throw an alert. Oops, I had a typo in there, but I put my JavaScript in place, save, and you can see it is already rebuilding. That JavaScript is in place. And if I click on this thing, oh, it's not working. Do we have a typo? Oh, it's not called new Yeti card. It's called Yeti card. That's the problem. Save it. It should update in place. And we click on this thing, and there's our alert. So building a building block is just as easy as writing code in your code environment. My code environment happens to be the terminal and VI, so you see me doing there. But it's just code within code. You run the build system, and it just works. So we'll go into in a future video how to submit a building block once you're happy with it, once you've got it built. But that's it. That's all it takes to get a new building block running in the building block system. Alright, so now you've learned how easy it is to create a building block using just HTML, Sass, and JavaScript. And you've even learned how you can make them lay out however you want beautifully by defining a layout and some layout styles. Next, we're going to be talking about how you can submit these building blocks to the Foundation Building Blocks repository using a pull request so that you can have your building blocks featured live on the site. So join me for the next video on how to submit a building block. See you there!